Why don't we get started? I'll call this meeting to order. Do we have any guests here? They're the four of us, board clerk and 3 board members. And do we have anybody else? This was a meeting that was noticed, et cetera, correct?
Correct, yes. And
Okay.
there are currently no attendees at the moment.
Well, isn't Mark Johnson coming on?
He just came on, and so did President Bezikoff.
Oh,
we have
okay.
2 attendees. Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, and so they are observing and I can't see them in the window, is that?
That is correct.
Okay. And just so we're in the room, they're observing. If they want to raise hands or anything like that, they'll raise a hand. And
Yes, it's just
you'll
like a
let us know.
regular, it's similar to a board meeting. It's just not live streamed on
Okay.
YouTube.
So
All right.
clarification there. So if it's similar to a board meeting, we don't actually have people raising their hands and asking questions out, which is, I think, how we've done this in the past. We've had the subcommittee, if we've had, and so we don't have external questions because it's really, we'll have a faculty representative, we'll have a student representative, we'll have the administrator, and then we'll have the board members and the agenda items, but we don't actually take questions from outside because we're paralleling the board meeting. There could be if we wanted. Go ahead.
We do
I'm
have
sorry.
public comment. So we do have public
Yes.
comment and that's it. That's the only questions
Perfect.
or comments that
Okay.
can be made at that time. Yeah.
Thank you.
So we do have an agenda that has
Mm-hmm.
been posted. And is the first item on that agenda public comment?
No, it's called order and then roll call.
Okay, thank you. Why don't you run us through those paces, Sasha?
Okay, you already called the meeting to order, so now I can do roll call.
Thank you.
Trustee Ewan,
I'm right here.
Trustee Reese,
Oh, yes. Yes.
Oh, Trustee Withrow,
Yes.
Dr. Nathaniel Jones.
Yes, I am here as well.
All right, we
Hey,
have a
Dr.
quorum.
Jones.
Hello, everyone.
All right, good. Okay, and now this next item, I'm flying blind a little bit here, Sasha, because I don't
No problem.
think I have a copy of the agenda. We were
It's in board
noticed.
docs if you can see it, and I can send it to you if you like.
Thank you. All right.
When you want to share your screen, Sasha, that might be quicker.
I'm doing the minutes, so.
Oh, I see. I
Yeah,
see.
so then
No
it just
worries.
but I can send this to everybody right now, so everybody will have a copy. If you just
Yeah, if you could send it, then I'm happy to. Once I get it in my inbox, I'll open it up and share if that's helpful.
that would be great. Thank you.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Not a problem.
Okay. And I am logging into board docs as well. Sorry, I'm a little, I didn't know I was chairing this meeting until like 2 minutes ago.
Well, I didn't know that I was supposed to be in this meeting until just a little bit ago. So we're both in a similar.
Okay, here we
Sounds
go.
like the beginning of a fall semester.
Yes, it does.
So next item is the approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Great.
Oh, wait 1
seeing-
second. I'm sending the email to everybody.
Thank you. I'm going to dispense with a roll call on this, just to ask for all those in favor.
Aye.
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 Okay, any opposition? Abstentions? Okay, the agenda is approved, and now we've got public communication. Sasha, do we have anybody? Mark, Rudy, public communication?
No hands.
No
are
one's
raised.
raising their hand.
No.
All right, all good. And then now we have approval of the minutes from the last meeting. Have people had an opportunity to review the minutes? And if we have had, if people have had that opportunity, can I have a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Great. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Abstain.
Any opposition? Any abstentions?
Abstain.
Okay. Got 1 abstention and 3 ayes. Minutes have been approved. Good, okay. So it's going to be a pretty short meeting. We'll see how much we can really get done. We've been a while since we met last. And the first order on our next order on the agenda is the update on the members of the committee. And it seems to me that when we met last, we were asking for membership from the shared governance constituent groups, classified faculty and students. We had asked that staff move forward to ask the chancellor to make appropriate action, take appropriate action to get additional membership. Dr. Jones, do you have any updates for us on that?
I do not. This is the first time that I'm hearing about this issue because I'm new to this committee. I had been on a different board committee, so I'm playing a little bit of catch up. So I apologize for that. I'll happily take a look at that and follow up and see what I can learn.
Okay, Cindy?
I'm thinking, and I'm wondering, Dr. Jones, whether, because you're our administrator in the budget, which is even more appropriate now because you are the acting or interim vice chancellor for budget. And I'm wondering, since we had Siri Brown before, it probably makes more sense to actually have Dr. Droker be the administrator for this. And so, we'll if you're comfortable, once we've talked to the chancellor, and if you're comfortable going to the budget committee and continuing with the budget committee in that capacity, maybe we can just continue on in that way. But for today, you're here and you're present. But I think going forward, it probably makes more sense in terms of knowledge base and expertise. Not even so much expertise, but just sliding people in their respective roles into the committees.
Yes, that would be fine. Yes, because I think that's
Okay.
why I was confused, because I had been doing this before, but now I think the budget was on my calendar too. So wherever you guys need me to be, I'm happy to serve in either capacity. Although given what I'm currently doing, the budget committee probably makes a little bit more sense.
Well, Dr.
Right.
Jones, why don't you consult with the chancellor? This is really the chancellor's call, whom she would like
Okay.
to be here. But if you would consult with the chancellor, and then if you wouldn't mind, obviously we don't direct you. So this is, you're communicating to the chancellor to, get any of this done. So, Sasha and Nate, if you could figure out what is the appropriate mechanism to get appointments from classified Senate, from the academic Senate, and from the student leadership. We don't,
Got it.
that's going to be an awkward thing. We need to figure out some mechanism to have student representation here, but that all 3 of those are critical. And if we can make sure that happens,
Okay.
an appointment happens by the next meeting, that would really be, I think, helpful.
I will
Sasha and Nate,
my next
between the
meeting
2
with,
of you,
the chancellor.
figure out.
Yep.
Cindy, is that a latent hand or is it a new hand up?
Oh, sorry. No, that's an old hand. Thank you.
Okay, that's fine then. Okay, so, and then if I can just double check with the committee. So Bill, you're new here, but at the last meeting, we had consensed that we did in fact want shared governance participation on this critical, committee, eyes from different constituent groups and that voice. I'm presuming that we continue to desire that as a board committee. And
I can go with that.
okay, good. So let's move on then, knowing that we're missing, critical voices here. But if we can then, I don't know whether we're going to be able to, how much additional business we're going to be able to do, because we don't hold the information. The next item is discussion of the state of student governments, bus pass implementation, and then participation with state law regarding civic engagement. And why don't we start with the bus pass implementation if we have any direct knowledge of how that's going from Dr. Jones? Is that something you have any eyes on?
I do not have any eyes on that. I think that unfortunately, Dr. Droker had a previous commitment, and I think that that falls within her area of responsibility. So I can only tell you what has already been publicly made available in terms of the votes that occurred, and that I believe that they are moving forward with implementing that because the student groups did approve and express an interest in still having the bus passes. That's pretty much as I'm aware of.
Okay, quick question that I want to raise on this matter. So just by way of history, people know we had the bus pass, students voted on it probably 10 years ago, something like that. There was a flawed revote on to renew it. It had been renewed once, and then there was a vote again. The vote was miscounted. We asked for legal opinion on that. And then there were questions raised. Now, there was a determination that the count of the vote had been incorrect. Actually, a majority of those casting votes on the question voted to renew it. But there was a question then whether that had to happen individually on each campus. And as I saw the vote, it looked like district-wide, there was a strong majority to reinstate the bus pass, but that those votes were uneven across the campuses. Have we made as a district the determination that it is the district-wide approval and not campus by campus? Is that what we've done? Are the bus passes being made available on all 4 campuses, regardless of the votes on each separate campus?
I would say that this was a collective decision that affected the entirety of the district and not the individual campuses. So the decision affected all students, not just the students that voted yes for it. That's my understanding. I would have to confirm that, but that is my understanding.
Okay, well, you would know in particular, because I think, as I recall, and I may get this wrong, and Bill, maybe you know, because you pay attention to College of Alameda, it seemed to me that it passed on other campuses, but at College of Alameda, it might not have actually passed.
That's my understanding.
Yeah,
But
and that
as
may
a
have also
district,
been the result that we've had really significant challenges getting student participation and having a working student government. That may have also
Right.
been a key driver of that particular outcome.
yeah, and I think the question for me was that the legal opinion that I saw on this matter was that implied, one might have inferred from the opinion that it was going to be a vote on each campus that was binding separately on each campus. But it seems as though as a district, we've made the determination that we're going back to the way we were doing it, which was district-wide vote, district-wide majority, binds all students, all campuses. And I don't need to press that anymore. If that's, I just wanted to clarify that's in fact what we are doing. If at our next committee meeting, we could just get an update on the implementation, on progress, et cetera, that'd be super helpful.
Okay.
And this is within the context of this question. When we look at student success, one of the critical things that we're looking at is how prepped are our students for success? Do they have transportation security, housing security, food security, et cetera? And so, the bus pass is one component of that. Does that make sense, Bill, in terms of the context in which we're raising this?
Sure.
Okay. Did we lose Cindy? Or is that Cindy on the 415? There we go. Okay.
So yeah, so
Yeah.
unfortunately, sorry, President Rees. I can't move her over as a panelist for some reason, so I went ahead and renamed her and gave her allowed her to talk as an attendee.
Okay. And Cindy, I gather you're still there.
Yes, I am, and I just caught the middle of that, but keep on talking so that I can contribute once I get a full sense of the context instead of having you repeat it all again.
Okay, what we've determined is that the bus pass implementation has gone forward on all 4 campuses, but we don't know, we don't have a status update on how well it's going. I'll just say anecdotally, I know my daughter got a bus pass being registered at Berkeley City. And, but I don't have anything more than that very brief anecdote.
So here's a question for you, and I don't know if we've ever actually gotten updates on how things are going. And I don't know if that's also part of what we normally do or something that we can do. So maybe Dr. Jones, if that is something that we can get an update about in your conversation with the chancellor, I think that would be good in either space, whether it's the board meeting or whether it's here, because you all fought so much to make that or correct that error from years ago. It'd be really good to see 2 things, right? If it's passed, it's been implemented, how many students, is that what you're asking? How many students have actually have it at hand and are using it? Is that what you were asking, Nikki?
Yeah, just how is the rollout going? Because the whole program fell apart when it was, partly during the pandemic, but mostly because we canceled it. We mistakenly canceled the program. It was a real tragedy. The majority of students voted to keep it. District administrators said, nah. And the way they did it, I won't go into it. I'll stop. There was an error.
Yeah, let's not
made.
go into it. It's not important.
It
but
was now
here.
that has been corrected. And again, Cindy, the context that I was raising this in terms of student success is student readiness for success. If student can't get to class, they can't get to work, if they're spending too much time trying to deal with travel, they're not able to study, they're not able to get to class, et cetera. So that's the context in which we're looking at this. The second item on this agendized item then is the status of student governments. And Dr. Jones, and I see, President Beskoff is here as well. It would be fabulous for us to have a better understanding of what's going on with student government, especially during pandemic. And Dr. Jones, I think as the immediate, as a president on leave at the College of Alameda, you probably have the intimate knowledge of the challenges that you faced there.
Certainly.
Can we have a status report on what's going on across the district in terms of student government, what's working well, and where do we need to help them? What resources do they need? And why don't we start with you, Dr. Jones, and then if we could call in President Beskoff, that would be, I think,
Well,
helpful.
I looked at this, and so I think that there's a number of issues, but just in terms of the number of people that we have on a regular basis coming to campus certainly has its bearing on it. The other thing is the eligibility requirements. And the eligibility requirements, I think, indicates that there needs to be 6 or 9 units, I don't remember off the top of my head, that you have to be enrolled in at a particular college in order to serve on the student government. And so if we want more robust participation, we may want to look at modifying some of those eligibility requirements, because they do serve as a barrier for students to participate. So that is definitely something that we have experienced at the College of Alameda. And I could imagine that that may be a particular barrier for other campuses as well, although some of them may have somewhat higher numbers of students. So that may mean that the effects may not be as great on the other campuses, but they definitely is a barrier that we should probably look at revisiting.
So what are Dr. Jones, what are the requirements for student government participation that you just delineated?
It's the number of units that the students have to be enrolled in at a particular campus in order to serve on student government for that particular campus. So for example, if they were only, and we know that this is a challenge, that many of our students are taking classes at multiple campuses, but if the minimum is say 6 units, but they may be only taking 3 units at our campus, but 2 classes at other campuses, they couldn't be on COA's student government, even if COA is their home campus. It has to be both the home campus and the number of minimum units.
And how many units is that? Is it 9, 12, 6?
I don't remember off the top of my head. I'd have to look at the policy to tell you exactly, but it is it's like somewhere between 6 and 9.
Okay, and this is obviously where having student government representation here would be super helpful to see whether they think that's the issue. Dr. Beskoff, you've got your hand up, but let me, before I go to you, colleagues, are we on the right track in terms of the discussion here?
Sure.
Okay. Dr. Beskoff.
It's actually a good place to talk about it.
I'm sorry, Cindy, say that again.
Oh, I was just saying that I think this is a great place to be talking about it because we never have time on our regular agenda. So this is good.
All right. Dr. Beskoff. I see your hand up, and Sasha, are you able to give him permission to?
Once I'm allowing him to talk now.
There we go.
Hello, good afternoon. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
yeah, you're in.
Okay. Right now, I apologize. I'm actually in my car driving back. I was at an event off campus, which is why you only see my photo today.
Mhm.
May I speak first to the AC Transit item?
Please, yeah. Okay.
So one of the things that we're finding at Laney that is and we certainly embrace the partnership with AC Transit, but the 6-unit requirement is one that is the eligibility for that is something that's an issue because at the Laney campus, the average load per student is usually lives somewhere around 2 classes or 2 3-unit classes. And if you look at it that way, that means that those below the average, assuming 6, are not eligible. So that's one aspect of the partnership that we're working with the fall that we're promoting to see about essentially using our funds to cover costs for students that fall below that line. So that was the first thing I was going to say. As far as student government goes, we've actually been in pretty good position at Laney, and at our recent participatory governance leads meeting, I believe it was shared that the student government has only 2 vacant seats for fall semester on all of our participatory governance committees. And unlike previous colleges where I served, it's not just the main college council. There are student seats on enrollment management. There are student seats on the learning assessment committee and other groups. So it's been vibrant and the participation's been good. And it's something that I would say predates my time at Laney even.
Dr. Beskoff, is it the case that you have a fully staffed student government, or is it still a bit patchy?
I would have to I'll go ahead and get back to the board on exactly how full it is, but I don't recall any vacant positions. But again, that's I'll come back to the board with that information.
I see. Okay. So for our next meeting, if we re-agendize this, it'd be fabulous to get a status report. And in particular, if we've got uneven participation or other challenges, I know up at Merritt, there was some challenges with finding people to run and then running an election and having real participation 2 years ago. I don't know what happened in this past year. It'd be really good to hear from students what seems to be working and whether the threshold of low units is an issue. And if so, how they would like to address that. I'll just say personally, for me, it's been really disturbing to see it, in particular at the College of Alameda, literally no student government. It's a disservice to the district to not have that intelligence, to not have that viewpoint really vigorously represented. And so I don't know what's going on there that's happening. I don't want to speculate what's going on there. So getting a better sense of that. I don't know, colleagues.
May I interject for a second? Also,
Please.
Remember that the 2.5 years have been anomalous, right? Probably our student leadership was a little bit more robust prior to, and I think all throughout the pandemic, we were trying to figure out how to motivate, how to inspire, how to get students involved. But the past 2.5 years, I think we have to just kind of put that in quotation marks, because we just don't know if it was truly different from what it was and what it's going to be in the future. So I think that this semester will be a good gauge, and next semester, or this year, will be a good gauge.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Bill, any thoughts here?
Nothing.
Okay. I think, Cindy, you've raised a really interesting question. And I think it's a learning opportunity, because what you see is that it's on some campuses in the district and across the state, we have very robust participation. And then on some, it's been a real challenge. And I think that that's actually helpful for us to understand, like when people are doing it well, what are they doing that the other people aren't? I say that not just in terms of the student governments per se, but across the board, student services and online education, et cetera. There are obviously some ways of engaging people that are more effective and some ways that are less effective. Let's take the opportunity to learn here in the middle of this situation, which, by the way, it doesn't seem to be going away. We're not going back to where we were. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think we're going back to pre-pandemic norms. I think the world is now shifted, and a lot of students just don't want to come to campus. They're just not going to come.
And I would always, yeah, absolutely. And I think we're still trying to figure that out too, what this new horizon or landscape looks like. But we just want to remember, as we collect this data and this information, what we could do as a board to help encourage you all to kind of do it. Because it's not our area, but whatever we can do in terms of policy or structures to help it become more robust at each of your colleges is really why we're engaging in this conversation.
Absolutely. And I think Cindy, thank you for that, because this is a question of board policy. Is there some policy role where we say, we should have policy that addresses this differently? So the last part of this item speaks to civic participation compliance. So we have state law that requires the district to have a civic engagement officer in the district whose job it is to promote participation in elections, voter registration, and other civic life. Dr. Jones, do you know whether the chancellor has made that appointment yet? because it's been about a year since this law came into effect. And I've never heard of somebody who had that job.
Maybe Dr. Besikoff knows more than I do. I do not believe that is an appointment that has been made. So I
Okay,
think that potentially it could fall within the executive director of marketing and communications. At my former district, some of those functions fell within that. Government relations fell sort of in that area as well, but I don't know that to be the case here specifically.
Dr. Besikoff, do you have any knowledge of this? Are you familiar with the law, even the requirement?
I'm afraid that I do not know.
All right.
I could not speak to this.
Okay,
And
I'll
then
just
maybe,
say,
Nikki,
yeah.
what I would suggest is if we could actually attach that particular law to, because to be honest with you, I am searching through my mental archives and I'm not sure if I know exactly what that states. And so it'd be good for us to all have that so that we're
Okay,
on the same page and then have a conversation about it. If you could
Yeah.
actually just send it to us so we can attach it to the minutes of this, would be good.
I have provided this to the chancellor in the past, to several chancellors in the past. So we'll see. I'll just look, this is just me now opining. All right. And I have no particular authority over hiring in this district, but it's my opinion that every student activities director should have as a minimum qualification deep experience in student civic engagement work, voter registration, voter mobilization. That should, in my opinion, be a minimum qualification because that's a critical component of advising student governments. We've got these student representation fees. They collect $2 a semester. They put it into an escrow account, and that's supposed to be used for student engagement, student representation. We now have state law that requires that the district have an officer whose job it is to promote voting. We're running up on yet another election, and typically voter registration is low and voter turnout, voter participation, 18 to 24-year-olds, sometimes is as low as like 8%, like literally. We're amiss in missing this. So if we can, re-agendize that and then ask staff to come back with a report on our status, as well as kind of a request from the student governments. What do you need to better spend your money, your student rep fee money? A lot of students have no idea that that money is even there. They don't know what it's for, and they don't have that expertise. We should be providing that, in my opinion. And again, I think this is critical for student success. And I could make that connection really easily, but I won't right now. I'll just leave it, again, we haven't met for a year, so it's not, I'm not expecting a lot.
Actually, right, and it'd be good to see the verbiage of that law, just because, as we know, if it's not tied to funding at the state level, oftentimes the specific verbiage has that each district has to do this, this, and this, but not necessarily have an actual person in that position. So rather than talking the abstract, I think it'd be really good to have that in front of us so that we know.
Yep, absolutely.
Then,
Yeah, this is absolutely an unfunded mandate. I believe it was passed in might have been 2021. I think it's called the Student Civic Engagement Act, and it covers the CSUs, the UCs, and the community colleges.
And the unfundeds are always difficult, right? Because if it's really a law and it really is a mandate, they have to tie funding to that. But I think that and so let's have this conversation once we have that and see where the chancellor is as it relates to the hiring, and also too, we've got the budget and the budget issues. So we just, there's a lot at stake. It's not merely.
And does it have to be
why
a
don't we bring
full-time
this up now?
position?
No, it doesn't. So it could, for example, be the director of student activities at Merritt College, or the director of student activities at Laney College could just officially have that position.
Right.
And then how they implement it and coordinate among other student activities directors, that's up to them.
Right, exactly.
Right.
No, that makes sense. As long as it's not a full-time position, it gives us a little bit of flexibility in how we can comply with the law, but in a way that is fiscally responsible.
Yeah, absolutely. While we are on this issue, I want to just ask whether, Bill, Cindy, there are other items in this kind of neck of the woods that you'd like to see us addressing in future meetings as it relates to student success. And so this is like expanding our brains and thinking, okay, within the purview of what we're doing here, what else would we like to be talking about?
Thank you for bringing that up. I didn't put that into the agenda for this meeting because I felt that the committee itself ought to determine what we look at. But student success to me is a quantifiable figure. And it would seem to me that that should be a part of every agenda, where we stand from the standpoint of student success as it relates to the accreditation criteria. And is it parallel? Is it going down? Is it going up?
Mm-hmm.
That kind of an issue where we quantify that. Along with, I was on a meeting with the CCCLC or something, whatever the acronym was, earlier today. And they talked about the percentage of students that are part-time. And this, the very large college indicated that 80% of their students were part-time. That to me is a large figure. It is a tremendously large figure. And I don't know that I've ever seen anything that would indicate where each of our colleges and the district as a whole stood from the standpoint of part-time.
Okay, yeah.
Just go ahead, I'm sorry.
I think that that's a really excellent point, Bill. I think that we want to go back to the data, because even when we were discussing our board goals and our board objectives, I think one of the areas that we as a board kept discussing was we have these board goals. We want to make sure that our students are succeeding, but we also are never able to do a deep dive. So going to the metrics, going to the data, being able to see how our plans are actually working, if they are working, those are the things that we can look at generally at the board meetings, but the subcommittees allow us an even closer, maybe question answer or look at that. And I think that we do really need to use these committees as an opportunity to do deeper delving into those areas.
Well, we
The
know,
other thing that I would suggest too is, oh yes, go ahead.
Yeah, don't go.
yeah, the basic criteria that is looked at from the standpoint of enrollment, it ties it to unemployment. And our unemployment is very low. In fact, it's the way it's designed is very, very low, but the lack of people for hiring is even lower.
Yeah.
And it could be that we need to look at, if they're working, when can we provide education, provide courses that are outside the boundary of 8 to 5 and on Saturday and Sunday. to see, I don't know that this is a viable thing, but look at it from the standpoint of, would that be a positive from the standpoint of the community? Because I look at, quite frankly, not
Yeah.
only just the financial and all of that stuff having to do with it, but it's not good for the community to not be providing education to a higher percentage of the population in our area. And so that's the kind of thing I'd like to see.
Yeah.
The agenda for future meetings.
Good. I see Dr. Jones and Dr. Beskoff. I'm going to call myself and then I'll call on you, Nate, and then Rudy. Bill, I really like the point you're making about who are in fact our students, and it's the structure of how we're doing enrollment management, student services, et cetera, serving the students we have. You've raised one metric, part-time versus full-time students. And are we in fact setting ourselves up to support their success? I want to raise sort of two additional questions that are kind of in that realm. One is, when we look at the SCIF, we've got certain metrics now that are supposedly about success, and we're going to be funded on how successful we are. When we go and we look at our budget every year, most of the conversation we have has to do with enrollment management, which is appropriate at 70% of the budget. But how are we funding the other components of that student success formula? And when we do enrollment management, are we paying attention to the other components? For example, if you've got a class that has a higher percentage of students where you get to double dip, like not only are they enrolling in your class, but they fall into a particular category of student who you get paid more for, presumably because you're providing better services for them. And so having that kind of a breakdown of our budgeting processes, how are we considering where our dollars go in relationship to the SCIF? Which then leads me to my last point I want to make here. I think this is, again, really where it's helpful to have students and faculty and staff, as well as board and administrators, in then assessing what do we mean by student success. The SCIF purports to measure a kind of student success. It says if you've got, a certain kind of employment, postgraduate employment, or if you've got certain kinds of financial aid eligible students getting certain services, that's going to be successful. All right. Are those the measures of success that we should be using? I mean, those are the mandated ones, but are those substantively really what people in our community think of as being successful? Those, again, are state mandates. Do they comport with the realities of our students, faculty, and staff? I think we want to be asking that question. Dr. Jones, you've got a hand up, and then Rudy, I think your hand is newly up, so I'll circle back to you. Dr. Jones?
Sure. I have several comments that I would like to share. First of all, the board has multiple opportunities to receive data and information around this. Periodically, you see and have to approve the student, the SCA, the Student Access and Success reports that provide updates on how we are measuring and what we are doing in terms of closing the equity gap for students. Additionally, our accreditation reports provides a ton of data. I heard you mention, Trustee Withrow, about what is the student profile in the ACCJC ISER report that we submitted. We always include a student profile that gives you an overview of the current profile of the students that we're serving. We also are providing regular updates in terms of of other kinds of institutional set standards that we report on as well. And these documents also, it's come to the board for review and approval. What is really, really great in terms of, Trustee Ewan, your comments is we're at the point where we are doing an update to our strategic plan where you can actually define exactly what success measures you're going to use to determine the degree to which the district is moving in the strategic direction that it has established for itself, and then set opportunities for regular updates and status on those particular measures when you've operationalized those particular metrics. And so it gives us a really, really good opportunity to be very, very specific and very, very intentional, not just incorporating measures that are applicable to either SEA reporting or the SCIF reporting, but also includes other measures that specifically we believe drive strategic objectives that the district has deemed appropriate for us. So I think that those would be considerations that I think we should bear in mind.
So with that in mind, Dr. Jones, I think whoever moves forward staffing us maybe can come with a proposed set of metrics. Here, look, as this committee is looking at student success, these are the baseline metrics that the administration is using to measure success. And then each time we meet, we can look and say, all right, how are we doing in those metrics? And then what are we doing to support those efforts?
Exactly.
Where are we successful and where are we not being quite so successful? What do we do to learn from both of those areas? So thank you. Dr. Beskoff?
Yes, I just wanted to provide a bit of data. This is a limited piece of data, but for the spring 2022 semester at Laney College, 48% of our students were 24 or over 24 and attending part-time. And I know there was a question about what that data looks like. And I realized the over 24 is an additional qualifier, but I wanted to share that with the board. And then if it's okay, I'd also like to ask a question, and if it's okay, I'd like to ask Trustee Withrow since he kind of mentioned it first. But in terms of wanting to know about student success, as a board member, as you engage your constituency, for you, is your particular interest, are students passing their classes? Are students carrying on into a second and third semester? Are students joining the president on the platform at graduation? Are students attaining employment? As far as your definition of success, and of course other board members on the call, just as a college president, I'm curious to see when you say success, what you're particularly looking for.
I think all of what you just talked about, that's number one. Number two, and Dr. Jones said that it's available at the board for review, but it would seem to me that this committee should look at a lot of this data in greater depth than what the board as a whole was looking at. And it's not an easy role to define what is good and what is not good, but it's my understanding from workshops that I've gone to and whatever, that there is a state set of criteria that we can look at and find, are we in the somewhat in the middle? Are we in the lower end? Are we in the higher end? Basically that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well,
Cindy,
our team can provide a lot of that data in terms of 6-year graduation rates at the state, national, and compare us to those other measures, persistence rates, student course completion rates. All of those things are information that we regularly report on. Number of degrees and certificates awarded, all of these various measures of success. We just need to, and that data is available where we can compare ourselves against the state averages and national averages to see how we are faring.
And truth be told, if we look at the state averages in terms of the success rates, that using the indicators that they have, it's not great, right, for the CCCs. And so I think the question that we have had as a board has always been, how can we continue to improve against our own rates? Because if we're, and I think I remember we went to the Aspen Institute or the Aspen Fellowship with Bill, and for a couple of the different indicators, our colleges were actually above the state. And so when you're comparing to an average that's lower, we look like we're doing good. But the reality is, I think as a board, what we really would like to see is this, what can we do to continue to get our rates higher and higher using our own maximum or higher averages or higher rates. And I think that the other part of the practical, away from the data, but the practical conversation too is, and this is an ongoing national discussion, are we preparing our students for the jobs? Are we giving them the kind of experience and or credentials that allow them to have self-sustaining jobs, right? Are they able to afford to live in this area? Like, those are the questions that we have, I think, many conversations about, and that is difficult because that's just difficult. But those are kind of the indicators that and the data that we have both at the state level as well as at the colleges and the district level. It's hard to track after they've graduated, and then in the positions and what are their wages. I know that that's one of the metrics that the Vision for Success has. However, that's a little bit harder to track. And again, those are not great. So I think it becomes a matter of, can we do better? Can we do even better? And how can we as a board support from our vantage point how you all can help the students do better, even if they're beating the state, but they're still not quite able to sustain themselves, if that is even a discussion or conversation, right?
Good, thank you. I'm going to call on Bill, and then I'm going to call on myself. Yeah, Bill, got a hand up, or is that a latent?
Yeah, I want to follow on to what Cindy was talking about, and again, 3 different workshops that I've been involved with. Where do we stand from the standpoint of conveying career awareness? This is an issue that apparently California as a whole is behind the rest of the country. And I'm not going to say they are or aren't, because this is just their view and whatever. But to what degree do we get involved with career awareness and coordinate the sensitivity with the 12 of the high school kids?
Let us absolutely add that to an agenda item for the future. We can put it all under the rubric of guided pathways and look at what are our guided pathways programs. We probably have some models. I just was in a conversation with Brad Baluchian up at Merritt, where they're developing out internships, job placements in the field of environmental sustainability. And I know we have money, guided pathways money. Where is it being spent? How is it being spent? I think that's the question, Bill, that you're asking. And there's a rubric for that discussion and a whole funding stream. So let's not try to get into a deep discussion about it now, but ask staff to, as we put together the next agenda, we can't deal with all of this at once. And we've got to figure out what's the appropriate bite that we take as trustees. But I think, Bill, you've asked a good question there. Dr. Jones, Bill, do you have another thing on that before I go to the next person?
Do I have anything else on that? Did you say?
Yeah. Are you
Yeah.
done?
Well, I think you addressed it. I don't need to go any further than that, but it's something that I would hope that we can address in detail as opposed to what the board would look at.
Yeah, good. I'm going to call myself and then I'll come to Dr. Jones.
Okay.
So again, what we're doing here is just thinking in terms of sort of future items, kind of looking at, we're tying into item 2.5, scheduling future meetings, but also just sort of following on the thing, just in terms of staying in an agenda. A component of measuring student success that I'm really interested in, and I'd love to hear the rest of your thinking on this, like if this is a fruitful avenue of inquiry, is one, what do we expect students to be doing to investing in their own success? And specifically in terms of time in lab, time doing homework, time in the classroom, time in the field, whatever it is. And I ask this because, we typically have a 3-unit semester long class. That typically means 3 hours a week in class. In an online class, presumably that means 3 hours of equivalent instruction. And then normally the standard university and college level higher ed standard is for every hour in class, there's an expectation of, and now it varies, 2 to 3 hours of study time, so that a student who's doing, say, 10 hours or 12 hours of in class, they're taking 12 units. Now they're going to be doing somewhere between 24 and 36 hours of study, and that makes them a full-time student. That, I think, has been the working assumption within higher ed. But as I look at students across the district and in the state, it's not clear to me that students think that that's their expectation. If they sign up for a 3-unit online class, what are they expecting to put in to invest in their own success and their learning? And then what are the faculty members expecting? So that as a faculty member designs curriculum, they say, well, I'm going to assign this book or that movie or this lab. How many hours is that going to take? Is that a reasonable expectation? Will they meet the learning goals that we've set up for this class within those parameters? Now, that's one side of it. The other side of it then is, what is the student expectation and the student capacity? And I think until we really begin to study and understand this, we won't understand why some students are succeeding and others are failing miserably. And Dr. Droker told me at a previous board meeting that when I had raised this question, she flagged it and said, yes, let's get institutional research on those questions. So what's the faculty expectation? What's the student expectation? And then what are the barriers and structures for students actually participating in that? Do they have a place to study? Do they have an internet connection? Are they homeless? Are they housing insecure? How many hours are they being required to work so that they can pay their rent, and how much extra time does that have? I think these are all, in my mind, probably the most central questions that a district could ask when trying to understand the parameters that lead to student success. Now, I want to put that out there and just see what the rest of you think about this. We are all deeply invested in the educational mission here. Does this seem to be a fruitful area of inquiry? President Reese, go.
Yeah, may I just interject there? I just don't know whether that is our conversation to have. I think maybe as a presentation, if administration opted to do that as a presentation, brought those discussions up, and then we could engage in that conversation. I just don't think that is it's quite amorphous. It's a lot of information. It's a lot of data that would need to be collected. So I'm just not sure if I see that as something that is, it just, as you're kind of going at one question at a time, yes, they are important. I just don't see how those would be answered, who would be doing the work, how we would engage in that conversation. If the administration decided to take that on independent of us, I think, and then brought it to the board in terms of what they've done, here are their findings, and then we have questions, that's one thing. But I think that if we brought that into a subcommittee, those would be questions that would necessitate information. And so then the question becomes, who has to gather that information? And that information would have to be gathered by, so I love the idea and I love the intent, but I think that it's going to be very difficult to frame that, and there's going to be an onus of responsibility as it relates to work. And I don't think I don't think that that's something that we should be doing. What we could be doing, though, if I may suggest, we could have that conversation with the chancellor, and the chancellor can decide how to do that. But I think that if the chancellor is not in the subcommittee, I think it's more difficult because it requires work, and then that probably isn't our role. But I love that intent and idea. I think it's a bit amorphous. It would really require work.
Let me respond, and then I'll call on you, Dr. Jones. I don't think it's amorphous at all. I think it's really straightforward. I think as a faculty member, I know how much work I assign. I know what my expectations are, but I'm not at all clear that those expectations are consistent across the college, my department. I also know in general how much investment students are making in their own learning, and what their expectations are. And I think those are easy questions to determine from an institutional research point of view. This is why Dr. Droker's view on this, I think, is really critical. Her position oversees institutional research. She volunteered that she had taken note of it and said, that's an interesting question to pursue. And so I think certainly, look, I'm a board member. I don't direct staff research.
Right.
But as a board member interested in student success and in the policies that support student success, if I don't have that information, it's really hard for me as a policymaker or as a budgeter, as somebody who votes on a budget, to say, yeah, we're doing it right or we're not doing it right. But we can agree to disagree. Cindy, Dr. Jones, what do you?
I think it's an interesting thought. Yeah. Go ahead, Dr. Jones.
Yeah, Dr. Jones, what are your thoughts here?
I have several. First thing that I would respond to was related to the question around career pathways.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that there are a number of things that we currently are doing and are planning to do that would inform some of that. First of all, and Dr. Besikoff can comment relative to Laney if he's still on, but most of our colleges that are engaged in guided pathways and have meta majors or field of studies all connect those to career opportunities. So if you go to the College of Alameda's website and see our various majors, we show maps and what kinds of careers that those students interested in those areas would lead to.
Mhm.
Okay. And so that is a strong emphasis. We also are engaged in conversation about workforce demand through our work relative to strong workforce. That's a specific state initiative that is intended to get students into jobs that are in high demand. The other thing that I would share relative to that, as part of the campus's education master plans and the district strategic plan, we're going to be doing an environmental scan. Part of that environmental scan is an external scan, which does an analysis of what are the demands for labor in the region and what kinds of, whether they're growing at 1% and what the average wages are in those fields. So we'll have in a few months a real good idea as to where the high paying jobs are likely to be in our region. And we can look at that data and use that data and information to suggest a couple of things. One, which programs that we already have do we need to consider expanding or making strategic investments in? Also, it will provide us information as to what new programs might we seek to build and to launch, because there are demands for those in the future. So those kinds of things I think would be really, really helpful as we begin charting the course for the district over the next, 7 to 10 years. I think that that's going to be really, really critical from a policy standpoint. You can look at what are the barriers that allow us to move more nimbly, which is something that we have to really grapple with, because I do think that that's a rate limiting factor that is really, really, critical. We're not terribly nimble, we're heavily bureaucratic, and therefore we don't respond as quickly to changes in the workforce demands. And so that's something that I think when and where we can become more efficient, more flexible, more adaptable, I think that improves our ability. That's one of the reasons why some of the for-profit institutions do a whole lot better at some of these things, because they can respond much more nimbly and more quickly to changing demands and parameters.
So let's just note that then, and as we continue, note the question, what do we need to do institutionally to be more nimble, to be more responsive? You've raised it, you've made a really important point. How do we fix that particular thing? Did you have a thought on the other question about
about the I think the real answer is this. I think getting that data will perhaps provide some additional clarity, but the reality is most students want to succeed. And we have collected data already in terms of student satisfaction surveys and SWOT analysis. So we have a lot of data already and information about what students believe are barriers to their success. To be quite honest with you, the biggest barrier to most students' success is their need to work while trying to go to school. If they had more time, most students would invest more of their time towards their education. But because they don't, they have to work, they have complicated lives, school gets what it gets, and they're doing the best that they can. We don't need to engage, this significant study for us to realize that. You talk to any counselor, they'll tell you the same thing. Students have incredibly complicated lives, and chief among them is their need to earn a living while simultaneously going to school. That's the biggest barrier that prevents them from investing as much time as they would otherwise want to, even if we told them exactly, hey, you need to be spending, an hour and a half, 2 hours outside of class studying in order to be successful. We can tell them, but if they don't feel that they have that time to invest, they're just going to do the very best they can and hope that they come out of the course with a decent enough grade.
If we have that data, I think that's fabulous. Every time I have asked, what I get is anecdotal. And what I'm hearing from you, with all due respect, Dr. Jones, is a little anecdotal. It's not quantifying what in fact are we communicating to students. Here is your path to success. If you want to be successful, you need to plan this amount of time to invest, and then understand what their expectations are, and then what the supports are and the barriers. If we can identify what their expectations are and we can alter that, I think that makes a difference. If we can then say, all right, what are the barriers to them being able to do that? Then we have the beginning of being able to figure out what we do institutionally to respond. I don't think it's enough to simply say, well, they have to work too much, so there's nothing we can do. I think it's our job to figure out what do we do to make sure that they are prepped for success. And I just haven't seen any data. I will say, out of my own classes, I sometimes have people sign up for a 4-unit quarter class. I ask them at the beginning of the quarter, it's an online class, how much time do you expect to study? And it's not infrequent that I have students tell me 3 hours a week, all in. Okay, on a 4-unit class, that's like, well, you're not even coming to class, much less doing any homework. But it's not infrequent that is very common. And Cindy, I'd encourage you to ask your students.
Yeah.
So anyway, let's wait for Dr. Droker to get here, and we'll see whether.
Yeah. Let's do that, because I think that might be a better conversation and I think also if we bring that conversation back, I think in your mind too, because as a faculty, I know how I approach that conversation, and it's also on our curriculums. It's how much time is needed for a particular class. But I think from a trustee level, and not to be answered at this particular moment, what would a policy look like that would actually help that? But again, I don't want to get into that conversation right now, because that's what I cannot.
Yeah.
I can't figure that out, and that's what's making me think that this is something that we want to solve all problems. We can't, but we need to, and I think that this is one of those where our faculty have to do what they're going to do, because each faculty member decides what they expect from their students. Our administrators will do what they need to do as it relates to their tasks regarding that. But as board members, I don't see how we connect what we do in terms of an actual policy that's going to respond to that. But let's think about those things when that conversation comes up, rather than trying to, again, have that conversation right here, right now.
Okay. We have gone through the approval of minutes. I misread this item, updates from members of the committee, and I was thinking that was item 2.4, discussion about adding members. So we did that. We did 2.3 and then expanded that to include kind of future agenda items. If we can move towards scheduling a next meeting and then setting expectations, I'm thinking if we meet 4 times a year, that would be a good balance between not overly demanding too much from staff, but also staying on track. That's a proposal.
Time. Right.
Yeah. Bill, Cindy, does that sound like, Nate, does that sound like an appropriate meeting
I think that
framework?
that's fine. It seems like it'll be twice per term then, fall and spring term,
Yeah.
twice, 2 meetings each term. That seems
Yep.
reasonable.
Something like that.
Yeah.
So, Bill, is
That
that,
sounds-
okay? So if we can look out, say 3 months from now, September, October, November, December, that'd be beginning of December.
Yep.
Is a Thursday a good meeting? I'm going to propose Thursday, December 8th.
I'm
As a-
not looking
as
at
a-
my calendar, but I think Thursdays could work. And remember, we're Dr. Droker probably instead of Dr. Jones, unless Dr. Jones,
Yeah.
you'd like to come anyhow.
Well, I may come,
so
but I'll talk to the chancellor, but Dr. Droker normally would be here. I think from previously, the vice chancellor of academic affairs at the
Academic affairs.
district and one of the presidents were regular members for this subcommittee. I just know that Dr.
Right.
Droker had a previous commitment and wasn't able to come, but normally she would be since she's fulfilling that role at this point.
Nate, Sasha,
Right,
would you
right.
take this back to the chancellor then and just clarify who it is from the administrative team, which president, and whether in fact it is Dr. Droker? And then Nate, if you can
Mhm.
just sort of carry forward the knowledge to her or whoever it is and share that out, sort of like, what did we talk about?
Right.
And then we'll put together a tight agenda that won't be the massive thing that we put on the
Enormous.
table right now. I mean, we
Right.
put on the entire mission of the college right now. I think we can focus in on 1 or 2 tight things, have an interesting conversation, look at some metrics and not overly burdened.
that'd be good. And then, to add to that too, maybe Sasha, if you could, once you have the right people, then maybe propose Thursday, December 8th, Nikki, is that what you said? And then,
Yeah.
or even give other options if Thursday at this time slot does not work because they
Yeah.
might have standing meetings.
We can be flexible on that question.
Yep.
Is there
Yep.
anything else for the good of the order here?
No, I think we're good.
No, I
Then
think-
why don't we move to adjournment? Thank you very much for your time and attention.
Wow.
And we'll see you sooner rather than later anyway.
Yeah, we'll see you
Tuesday,
next
right?
Tuesday. Bye, everyone. Keep
Bye,
cool
take
and
care.
hydrated.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.